Hey everyone, welcome to Reflections, the Wisdom of Edgar Cayce. We're happy to be coming to you live, courtesy of our broadcasting partner, MoreTalk.tv. And this week on the show, we're digging into the archives for a recorded interview with Harmon Bro and Edgar Cayce's son, Hugh Lynn Cayce. These two individuals were very closely involved with Edgar Cayce throughout his life. Hugh Lynn obviously as his son, and Harmon was a colleague of Edgar Cayce's. In this talk, it was recorded in the 1970s, and they share their perceptions on life, karma, anger, and more from the perspective of Edgar Cayce readings. Dr. Harmon Bro was a professor of philosophy and religion and a specialist in parapsychological aspects of religious life. He served as associate professor of religion and psychology at George Williams College in Chicago, Illinois, and he was also a director at the Institute for Religious Education at Syracuse University. His work and his friendship with Edgar Cayce led to his long relationship with the A.R.E., and his doctoral thesis, which was entitled The Charisma of the Seer, examined the life and work of Edgar Cayce. And you can find the bulk of this thesis contained within his fascinating book, A Seer Out of Season, that's published by A.R.E. Press. Hugh Lynn Cayce was the eldest son of Edgar Cayce. He turned his father's Association for Research and Enlightenment Incorporated into an organization of international renown and developed widespread recognition and acceptance of subjects such as psychical research, dream analysis, meditation, and spiritual development. He received critical praise for his first book, which entitled Venture Inward. This examined safe and unsafe methods of exploring personal psychic experiences, and for which the A.R.E.'s member magazine is actually named. His other books include The Outer Limits of Edgar Cayce's Power, which he wrote with Edgar Evans Cayce, and Edgar Cayce on Overcoming Fear and Anxiety with Kevin J. Todeschi, the CEO of the A.R.E. In this book, he explores the possible origins of fear as well as the very nature of fear itself. Hope you all enjoy the interview with Harmon Bro and Hugh Lynn Cayce.
And we're going to continue that this morning. And I'd like to reintroduce Harmon Bro.
Oops. I stood once on a cold platform in Chicago for the Illinois Central tracks on the south side waiting to go down to the Loop with Hugh Lynn many years ago. And he looked at me thoughtfully and said, "It's always people. It's always people." We had been talking about building the A.R.E. We had been traveling the last few years, and I wore out just trying to keep up with him, for as you know, for so many, many years he started in January and kept moving all over the country until May. I don't know how Sally endured it, and I don't know how he endured it. But often when I would catch him or go with him, I would ask him, "How do you build? What are you doing? What do you trust? What makes it go?" And he looked at me very thoughtfully that morning and said, "It's always people." And in that framework, I want to draw him out again this morning. But it isn't just a matter of his supporting, encouraging, liking, and pushing people, all of which I hope he'll talk about, and if he doesn't, I'll get him to, because he does all those things with style and creates alternately joy and alarm in most of us as we work with him when we see the fierceness of his determination to get things done. But I would like also to keep in view something that's on the sheets I passed out last night, and that is the marvelous training that's been unfolding for all of us, and we often don't know it. We often don't give it to others. And that's why I would like to make it a little more conscious today in our thinking together. And I tried some years ago in working with him and putting on summer weeks in the 60s to sketch out 5 levels of that training that I see him putting everybody through. Not just people in workshops, but board members, people who are friends and donors and advisors, just those who start reading and getting turned on and coming up at lectures, study group people, always pushing them up a series of steps. And I put those on the right hand of the sheet I passed out last night, and I think Fred has some extra sheets if you really need them. they're fun, they're exciting. It's soul growth in a very practical, down-to-earth way. The first level is one of just getting people to pay attention to one another in fellowship and to get a sense of direction and hope. Hugh Lynn taught me, when you're lecturing to new people, don't worry too much about what you're saying, because what you're doing is trying to reach their centers. And think as clearly as you can and talk as clearly as you can, but make that above all. The second level is getting people to pledge themselves to one another, to covenant. This is the study group process. It's families, it's staff, it's camp workers, it's people in councils, it's people taking each other's hands around an ideal. And in that process, beginning to heal one another. And Hugh Lynn long ago taught me that we don't simply inform and instruct each other nor give each other readings. First, we have business to do with our pain and our loneliness and our discouragement and our anxiety and drivenness. And with that goes increasing self-responsibility and responsibility for programs. And then finally, real study can begin using books and tools and readings and hard work of that sort. Often we think we're studying, and we're not. We're just getting stimulated. But Hugh Lynn knows how, and the rest of us do too. We've got work to do like this, and that involves getting people to do projects as well and inquire into their lives and into the readings. But there's still, in my understanding and watching this process, 2 levels to go. The next one is real leadership training, which means giving people solid tasks. One of my great joys in traveling with Hugh Lynn for a couple of decades in this spring torture course that he ran was watching him train people in Texas and California and New York, wherever he went. He put them on programs which was easier to do then than it is now, when A.R.E. is so big and so diverse. Yet it's coming again, friends, for we have to build one another at every level. And I'm suggesting not a headquarters process, but an A.R.E. process. And not a Hugh Lynn process, but a thing we all do with one another. And this involves supervising and helping people who are given tasks, not just dumping them, not just dumping those tasks on them. It involves getting to people also to work at research, because this is a research organization. Not professional research necessarily, yet as we train, we get clearer and clearer about what we're trying to find out and how we do it. And finally, and I see Hugh Lynn doing this right now, in the fullness of his years, he ain't quit. And that is relating people to one another as peers who are real leaders and getting them to help each other without his help or Charles Thomas's or Mark's or Herb's or anybody else's. And he's doing it with faces of fear and setting up seminars where he can get with professionals in the mental health field and religious professionals and others and get them to work with each other as well as with the people in their programs using faces of fear. He has pushed and pushed and pushed all the way up this ladder of levels of training, and in the process helped us to face our potential and our opportunities as well as our weaknesses and our limitations. And I find this exciting, and I want to draw him out about it, and at the same time keep in view the tremendous riddle that he and others, all of us really have wrestled with, how to make, it's the bottom of this page, how to make A.R.E. both a spiritual community and a business operation. It's kind of like a monastery that has its own winery, except the monks are always drinking the wine in this operation. And that does make it a little giddying and a little difficult. That is an extraordinary effort and enterprise. Extraordinary. For most spiritual communities limp along, don't get very far with the business stuff or spurn it. And those who work at business operations, and this is a big business, as you noticed with that budget and that breakdown that Vern did so well, do not stop for meditating. Do not begin meetings with quiet. Do not start working on a difficult new program by asking about the ideal. Do not seek, and I've got it here, snuck in with all the business functions of planning and policies and command and all the rest. I've got guidance at the head of it. Boy, you ain't going to find that in any management textbook. And yet it's of the essence of this enterprise. And Hugh Lynn has set that style, and many of us do it in our daily work and understand from working with A.R.E. that it's got to be. And when we start a council meeting or a team meeting or a planning session for something, without it, without seeking that help, or when we get to an impasse and don't take a break and get that quiet, we pay a price, and we know it. And what surfaces is old patterns brought back from Egypt or China or somewhere else that we just don't need right then. These are some of the things that I found as tremendous adventures, disciplined, focused adventures of people growing and helping one another under the stimulus of my favorite lion tamer, and I do mean lion, thinking of all the centers, and that's Hugh Lynn Cayce. Will you welcome him now with me?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Harmon, before we begin, I had a lady stop me this morning and remind me that I've been using a word that disturbed her. And I can understand it, and I want to change it now and get you to change it in your consciousness. I used the word last night, model family, model school, and she said that's a hard word to live with. And that resource family, resource school would make a better term. And I agreed with her and promised to change my use of the word. Now, I wasn't using model as she was thinking of it, but it's a better way. So let's talk about resource school and resource families that don't have to be models for perfection.
That's the...
Because I don't know many of those families, even in A.R.E. Even in A.R.E.
But it's part of your dream, isn't it, that there shall be the stimulus of efforts, projects, programs, families, groups that A.R.E. provokes or calls into life so that others can keep trying to do it, both in A.R.E. and around it. If I look at the clinic, I see an emblem of that kind of effort to get something going that can stimulate others, now bearing fruit. This has been part of what you've wanted to do all along, isn't it? To build these resource centers in some way that will foster more.
Sure. And the emphasis that's coming on the health facility that will be here, and there will be one here, a big one, should be, I think, the preventative, the whole business that will enable people to work now. Perhaps this comes out of my Chinese coming back. You know, Chinese doctors are paid to keep you well. You don't pay them. If you get sick, you quit paying. And it's a much better approach to the whole business. I think the preventative material in the Edgar Cayce readings is so exciting in terms of the diet and the exercise and the massage and the sweats and the packs and the bath, all the things that go into. Of course, as someone said, we're all sick to a degree, but I'm not looking at that. I'm looking at the wellness and improving it. And I think we'll be moving in this direction, and I think it will make it possible for families and the groups to share very definitely in a whole preventative technique. For example, any of you, and there are a block of you here, who have tendencies toward arthritis, you have a terrific opportunity to go upstairs and become familiar with whole patterns of diet that will stop you hurting now and keep you from hurting for a long time. And then if you slap a little peanut oil on you in the right places, it'll keep you greased and oiled so that you'll wiggle right along in much better condition. And it won't be so painful. Now, that preventative, I'm using that only as an illustration, for there are diet patterns in there for every tendency, and we could probably find every tendency for suffering in this room. Well, we could find a lot of them. We could find one in every one of you at least, but probably a few extra in some of us.
I want to draw your attention to a large picture with respect to karma that we've talked about sometimes, and it runs around in the heads of all of us at other times, I'm sure. And that is the heritage of this work out of Egypt, and out of Israel and its long history. They're in some ways two different styles of building and growing, and they represent a kind of a clash in our heads, one that's built from central authority with skill and drama and effectiveness, as was done in Egypt, and many of us have a vivid dream that we can do it again and should. And the other, a much smaller enterprise built around small groups perhaps. They seem to complement each other and at the same time war with each other. How do you think about these two pieces of karma that lie in the background of many of our lives? What do you see as the treasures to be drawn out of both Egypt and Israel as we meet and work and pull forth our legacy from within?
Of course, it's difficult for me, Harmon, to talk about this without being very personal, because for me, Israel has been a healing in relationship to Egypt. Egypt is both karma and success and pain and suffering, and Israel is healing for me. I think I'd better begin on this with a note that some of you have heard before, but not all of you. And I recognize, before you start thinking about it, so you won't think about it, that it may be simple manufacturing on my part, compensation, a way of satisfying myself in a time of stress. Many years ago now, it seems, I don't know how many, 5 maybe, I had a heart attack, a very small heart attack. I had it right here in this room. It started here and continued over, fortunately, long enough for them to get it on electroencephalogram, so they knew what it looked like. Very interesting looking. And it didn't turn out to be very serious, but it put me in the hospital for a little while, and they're very careful and cautious about heart attacks. And I stayed there for a while, got all involved in the hospital activities. And let me pause and tell you a crazy story that
it's going to be one of those mornings.
That happened in the hospital. I had a wonderful roommate who also had a heart attack, and he was a very charming guy, and we did 2 or 3 things that were lots of fun. The nurses come, and give you back rubs. So we put all the nurses' names up over our beds on cards. And we had one of our wives bring in some gold stars. And according to the values of the back rubs, we put stars up on, and you can't imagine what back rubs we got as the stars increased. But after we began to walk around, he and I, we were walking around the halls, so I was supposed to get out and walk and a little bit, and we found this sign over a door, and it said Patient Affairs. And so we were dressed up in our robes, and we wandered down one day after we'd planned this a little bit, and we went in, and this young lady, real young lady, was sitting there and said, well, we feel like we have recovered enough to have an affair. We're here She turned about as red as this boy's shirt up here on the front row. And we couldn't keep our faces straight, so we finally laughed. But it went off all right. But that went all over the hospital. You have no idea how many opportunities we had from that point on. But back to my rat killing. After this, I came home. I realized that there were a lot of things in my life I needed to change. And one of them was my meditation and prayer time and my Bible reading and inspirational reading, and so I doubled it, what I'd been doing, and then I doubled that. And as usual, and I think you'll find this to be true, when you push yourself in quietness and prayer, dreams become very interesting and change. And I had a dream that I want to tell you about for years. Oh, I don't know how many years. way back in my childhood practically, I've been going to school at night. When I talked to a psychologist, I don't think it was you, but I talked to a psychologist about it. He thought that I was trying to compensate for not having enough education. But that's all right. I go to this school. It's a magnificent, beautiful place, and I go in. I'm always going in or always coming out. And I never do know what I learned in there. I never do know what's happened in there, but it's in magnificent buildings. It's a beautiful place. On another level, I think, somewhere. And I meet some interesting people. I've met some of you there. And always happy to see you. I came out on this occasion in my dream, and I'd been at a meeting. And I could go around this room and pick out the people who were there, who are alive and here now. Oh, I imagine they were there. But there are a lot of so-called dead ones there, too. And Morton and Edwin Blumenthal were there. And my father was there and my mother. A lot of people that had been with the early organization. And Morton was telling me, Hugh Lynn, everything's been straightened out over here. It's all right now. The A.R.E. is going to have energy that it never had before. He said it's, and he used his simile, it's like money in the bank. You can write a check on it for any amount. And Dad was there, and he said, yeah. I said, Hugh Lynn, it's anything you can dream of can come about now. If you knew those people, if you had known them, and some of you did, some of them, you'd know what I mean. Just the idea of that happening on that level. The possibility that this took place. Is a healing that can extend over to every one of our lives in a very rich and wonderful fashion. And should. Now, Harmon's talking about this business. They had karma. And we need to define these terms because he's going to ask me about grace, and I'm going to throw it in before he asks me if I'm... So we better define them the way I'm using them this morning. You can use them, you can define them any way you want, but you better define them too before you start talking about it so that people know what you're saying. For me, karma is simply memory. Nothing else. You and I have no karma with each other. There's nothing between people. There's only memory in relationship to each other, which is quite different because it's buried in me, if I have memory, or it's buried in them. So what you remember is what you have to deal with in terms of karma. This is what Jesus was talking about when he talked about thought patterns and thoughts. He didn't call it patterns, but he said, you know, you don't have to commit something for it to affect you. All you have to do is think of it. And he was very specific. He was talking to some men, so he was naturally talking about women. And he said, if you just lust after a woman, you've already committed the act. And you pay for that. Don't kid yourself. You don't have to do it. You don't have to fulfill it at a body level. All you have to do is think about it. So the beginning here is in the mind. And the patterns are built there. And we store them. Now, this is just a theory. No psychologist here, even ours, even Harmon, I think he might lean this way with me. But I don't think he'd get out in public and say it among his professional colleagues. The memory is stored in the chakra. Now, the chakra I define as the energy patterns that correspond, they're in a finer body, the one we bring with us, correspond and transplant themselves into, so to speak, the endocrine gland system. So the memory is in the cells of the endocrine gland, the ductless glands in your body. Now, I'm talking about the sex glands. I'm talking about the cells of Leydig with the balance between the male-female. I'm talking about the adrenals that sit on top of the kidneys. I've got one hanging loose right now, but that's all right. I spoke to the doctor about that and asked him to be sure and get it hung right. And the thymus at the heart level, that desperately wicked center, and according to the Bible, the thyroid and parathyroid, and the pineal at the back and top of the head, and the pituitary, the controlled center, the master gland at the very center of the brain. These 7 for convenience. Now, we could throw in a few more, but that's enough. We can't handle the ones we've got. Now, you very easily. But the memory, think of this. When you begin to activate or live or express, think, and speak and act, it so frequently comes from here down. The affections, the feelings, the withdrawal symptoms, the feeling sorry, I'm speaking of negative, positive, the drive, the courage out of these adrenals, or the anger, or the hate, or the balance at the male-female level. All of us are both. And the sex drive. The memories. So they are the ones who start. This is where we act from. We get all messed up, Harmon. And think about these as separate energies. And it's one energy that we're the custodian of. This is where we live, ladies. This is where we function from. This is how we bring over these memories. Memories from experiences.
Hugh Lynn, address that just a little more in this kind of attention, will you? Many of us who learn and have learned from you and from the readings and elsewhere about these chakras get focused on, I've got to work on this one, I've got to work on that one, maybe I have to have a healing on it or put my hand on it or pray it at this level or something like that. And at the same time, we know about the process of the raising of energy through the whole cycle. Now, they're both real. We have to take account of the symptoms. I remember you stopping me after a class once and saying your class is not going to last long because you just blasted them all through that class. They won't endure. And we have to work on individual centers, and yet that's not the whole story.
Well, I don't think we work on centers. I think if you work on centers, you stir them up. And I know whole systems. I can give you even a few books out of the library up here that tell you to concentrate on centers. You better keep your head off of these centers. Because if you stir them up, open them up, you're going to have to deal with, and they dump right on you. And it's your dumping. It's what you collected, what you're carrying around. And none of them are ready to handle everything that is in these memories, all the way down the line. Dad used to pick, you remember, that which would be helpful for a person. Now, what do? Of course, the whole focus of the meditation, as Harmon has suggested there, is the movement of this energy, all the way up. And the movement is very instantaneous. It goes from the top to the bottom, bang, like that, and spills over into this pituitary. And then when it flows back down, it cleanses and heals. And this is why the prayer. This is why the meditation. And the emphasis on it. that is so absolutely necessary in the healing process. Don't try to... And this is why so many, we've talked about it, not paying attention to the negative in people. If you concentrate on that negative, if you keep thinking about it, if you keep telling people about it, if you keep arguing about it, if you keep grabbing at them about it, you simply increase the energy and give it energy and power. Where if you look for the good and pray, and there's healing involved in meditation together, it does move up and it comes back down and it washes it absolutely clean. This is the whole symbol for me of baptism. It's a symbolic cleansing. The oils on the head. What do you think? You kept pouring oils on people's heads. What are you going to do? Or throwing water on them, or even sticking them under the water. It's that running down process, that healing process that they're dealing with. The quickening of that higher consciousness so that the healing can take place. Now, the grave that we will be talking about today is very simple, by my definition here this morning. It's love, God's love, which is constant and eternal and has never turned away, and is constantly available, and available in so many ways that we must constantly look for the face of God. Yeah, in nature, it's easier sometimes than looking in people, because you got so much to look through, you think, because of what you can see. We project on each other so much, as you realize. This is why the emphasis is on the positive and not the negative. It can heal. It really can.
Hugh Lynn, when we talk about the movement of these energies, we often in our mind slip into thinking, well, that happens in meditation and in prayer. Perhaps it happens when I'm looking thoughtfully and deeply and lovingly in an intimate circle of the study group, the family, friends. Do these energies also move when we're struggling with power and wisdom and money and projects? Is it the same centers and the same flow? And can that energy spill over and move through us even in the middle of a committee meeting?
If we let it. Of course, if we're enjoying the arguments and the contest and the arguments and the fighting, I used to have trouble, as you well know, at this level. I've got a pair of adrenal glands that won't stop. And I love you. You wouldn't imagine that what I've been through with anger, what I've been through with the whole business of fighting and firearms and all this business of killing and getting involved. There are two up here in front that nobody's sitting on me. The two people that are sitting here won't mind if you come and sit on them. Come on. Two of them up here in front. This whole business of enjoying, and you know this, I don't want to get into this because it's a whole thing in itself, the enjoyment that we have of the energies, the negative emotions that we work with from here down. Now, Jesus turned up, I think, in the final three tests that he went through with the devil, testing these because there are difficulties up here too. We can get so self-righteous and so willful at the thyroid level, and we can get so pure that we think nobody can stand it. And we can get it up in these upper areas even here. But most of the time we are in conflict down here. And I had real problems with loving to fight. I learned how to fight over my father very early when I was a kid, and I enjoyed it. I kept enjoying it all over the place. I got till I was not bad at it. And then I went into boxing, to do it technically. Can you imagine that?
That explains a lot.
I was very glad. I was certainly very glad of that, because I found that Tom Chagoo had been taking a little boxing, and so when we actually got in a fight, I did all right. But the firearms and the shooting thing and all of that, I had to get rid of a lot of that, or I'd have gotten rid of part of me. I'm sure. Shot something off. And that would have stopped me, of course. But that's a hard way to go. You don't have to suffer. You don't have to face these things unless you re-enjoy them, reactivate them, and re-enjoy them. Then you have to deal with it, if you enjoy them too much. Whether it's your self-pity and your withdrawal symptoms, and woe is me, I'm being persecuted, or whether it's your anger or your hate, your irritation or your annoyance, the little ones, or whether it's the sexual or the imbalance. It's when you get involved that you stir them up. And the healing, I think, I'm certain, comes from upstairs, because you get connected with a light up there. And then you bring the light down with you. Oh, God, extra energy that is constantly flowing to us, His reaching as well as our reaching.
Talk about disciplines in terms of actual face-to-face encounters with one another. When we're building a work, we can feel when the rush of energy comes to one of those centers in a meeting. And there are choices we can make even in the moment, aren't there? I've seen you make them.
Oh, but I've done so badly at times, Harmon.
But I know you have disciplines.
I clobber people without meaning to, and I used to do it much more deliberately and consciously than I do now. I guess I've slowed up in my... It really is, a matter of working, because it's so easy when you've got the energy available to strike.
Well, what I see you doing at times is
bad, and you enjoy it, you see, when you do it. I've done it with you.
Sure. I remember. But I see you take that energy, the same energy. I can feel it in the room. We all can.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we're frozen when it starts. And then I see you turn it. You don't lay it down. You don't forget it.
Oh, you can't. You can't.
You turn it.
You got to do something with it.
Yeah.
You got to do something positive with it. You've got to do something constructive with it. And you've got to quit enjoying the negative feelings of it. That's the key to it. And when you can then redirect it positively, it becomes a tremendous, because it's God's energy. We're not using our energy. We don't use anything that is ours. It's God's energy that we're using. And we can we simply combine that which we're the custodian of with that which He's constantly trying to give us through His love and grace.
Let me ask you about something I see you do when that energy comes surging through. It's part of your job to push people, and you do it
I do push
heroically. It's like a bulldozer when it gets going. But one of the things I see you do right when that force is coming, make sure that it's constructive, or catch it just as it starts flowing, is look at particular people and say something constructive about them.
Mm-hmm.
Right in a meeting, right in a group, right in a family setting. You pick out faces, and I watch you just catch yourself. Take a breath like that. And then say something, mention something positive about somebody. Even when the room may be full of tension, something that a job someone has done, or remember a program someone put on. You're constantly, as I hear you and watch you, magnifying something constructive, and it changes the whole energy field. Am I right that this is a choice you make?
Oh, yeah, certainly, and it's a choice for everybody. And you make those choices every second, every minute of every day. They're not made at some critical point in your life. They're made every moment. And we've got to learn to make them every day, every moment, constantly, because the mind is always working. And we have to deal with this mind of ours, which is the builder. And so we have to be aware of that and able to do that, constantly choosing to do just that. There's another way, of course, that sometimes is easier and simpler, which is to humor. And it relieves the tension and pressure. And humor frequently that can relate to you, that you're chuckling at, laughing at yourself. The quicker you get in a position where you can do that, the safer you're going to be on the earth. You've got to be able to laugh at yourself. We're ridiculous. You know that. We're absolutely ridiculous with our petty jealousies and hates and fears and concerns and worries. We're dealing with the creative energy of the universe. We're ridiculous when we fill ourselves with these negatives and enjoy them and think that we're doing something very constructive.
I put the triangle on here because this is something I learned from you, that as we're working with persons and tasks, we're always building a field in which this takes place. And I call it lore, you call it thought forms. It's kind of the working scripture of any group. It's where we've been and who we are and how we did it best. And you, from early, I've watched you do this, you remember to sing the song of what a group has done and beat the drum of the good things and touch back to the special memories and keep the living thought forms or lore of that group alive so that the transactions are wholesome and healthy.
I wish I did more of it than I've done through the years, Harmon, because I frankly, where some of you have suffered as I dealt with you, is where I was enjoying my irritations and annoyance and impatience. I said after, for example, I've tried with great diligence to take my mind and my body and my concerns off of the management of A.R.E. And for a time, I used to, pace all over around these, everywhere, on all the buildings here, and pick up things that were going on that were wrong and so forth. And it's awful. But now I only pace in my office. Round in circles. I tried to really tell you. And I think the people who are head of the various departments have felt this, and I think they've appreciated it, because I'm not easy when I wish I'd done more of this through the years, but I have done and tried to do and continued to do some. I think what's happened, Harmon, is that I've had to do more of this with you than most people.
I'm glad I've helped you so much.
As I said, you've been more obstreperous than most. You had no idea how much difficulty this man has been in.
One of the ways in which I see you building this nifty set of positive thought forms all the time is, and something we can do in all our studies in the field, wherever we are in all our lives. I see you doing it in public in lectures. You remember to pick out things. You see someone's face in the audience, Nell is there, for example, or someone else, and you pick out and make a comment. You build right there a constructive team, a pool of energy, a pool of purposes. You focus on what people have brought to the campfire and the brand they've put in the blaze. You keep trying to celebrate, and you do it more, I think, than any of us that I know in the whole work. And I think you're determined to do it, and I've heard you talk about it, making up your mind to keep celebrating what each one has to give and to weave it into whatever you're doing.
Yeah. You see, it's not always good to praise people to the person's face. It's so much better frequently to praise people to others. And it builds the thought forms for them and helps them and quickens the whole pattern. And where you're closely interrelated, as we are here, I think that most of you realize this. I know Harmon senses this. When I am talking publicly, I do talk to individuals in the audience. Last night I said so. Just so 2 or 3 or 4 of you would get it. But one or two of them were kind of asleep, and I didn't want to wake them up. But seriously, you do talk to people, and you learn. You have to do this because I don't have opportunities to see you. I can't sit down with all of you anymore. I used to spend a half hour, an hour with lots of you when I saw you, or did across the country. And that's impossible now. There are too dead blasted many of you, and they are new people. So many new ones coming that I need to communicate with and touch, and so many that, well, it's a terrible thing. When you start looking and you start trying to deal with memory at an international level, as I've started trying to do now for years, it opens up all sorts of possibilities. And it just takes a tremendous amount of energy, and is taking it now, in all these directions, everywhere. I just came back from Germany for 3 weeks, and when I got back, my wife said, Hugh Lynn, we were breakfast, and she said, Hugh Lynn, you know what I really want to know now? Why did you go to Germany? And I had written it all out on the plane coming back. And, there are lots of superficial reasons that I could give you that don't make sense. But what I went there for, many of you have read already in the opening pages of Faces of Fear. I was more afraid there than I've ever been at any time in my life in Germany. And it took me a long time to be able to go back and be sure that that was healed. They were cheating. It wasn't of what was going on there.
You're talking about the Second War at this point.
At the Second World War. I was with the tank corps and raced across into Germany and so forth. But it was when I heard about Dad and Mother's death, and I lost track of God for a minute. And it scared the daylights out of me. I'd never done that before. With all of my background and all of my training. Don't ever be too sure, ladies and gentlemen. You get a particular kind of situation and you can lose hope, fall off the ladder real easy. And I went back to be sure that that was healed. And it was. It has been. But you've got to do these things if you begin to really remember. And that's happening. It's happening with people all over the world now.
I hear you inviting us as our lives ripen to their fullest years and our memories and talents come, not to hold back from taking trips that would put us in touch more vividly yet with some of the memories, if we know why we're doing it and where we're going. People think of A.R.E. tours as just another interesting thing to do. But there's a deeper design that's possible, isn't there?
Oh, yes, yes. And it's a way of helping to remember, recall, when you're ready. And you have to feel pulled and moved to do these things at the right point, not just for the wrong purposes, because it can mess you up if you do for the wrong purposes, like anything can.
Part of the process, then, of working with our karma in ourselves and one another's, as you've said so often, and Charles Thomas says it beautifully, too, is selecting which karma we're going to pull on. And I could welcome some comments from you about the ways in which we can work with one another to pull forth the better patterns, as well as from ourselves.
Well, you've got a beautiful setup in the readings for this. Look around you. If you want to begin to deal with your karma as memory, look around you. Pick out the best relationships of your life and deepen them, enrich them. But also pick out the worst ones, the difficult ones, and deal with those. Don't leave them hanging. Don't let them go. Don't pass them by because they grow. Things repeat themselves with karmic memory. And they have strong, deep emotional Edgar Cayce talked about the lives in the earth, about the tremendous emotional urges that we have. This is why one of the reasons I think they come through the endocrine, because of the strong emotional relationships we have. But the repetition and the strong emotions, but then deal with the worst and the best, and deepen and work with and face up to and begin to try to handle these. Now, sometimes you can't avoid that. I couldn't. You make a choice and you run right into it. I arrived in the earth, and by golly, here were a couple of my memories holding me. My papa and my mama. And I had a time, a rough time with Edgar Cayce. For me, he was far more than just a father, a very good one. Far more than just a good Sunday school teacher. Far more than the greatest psychic I've ever seen come down the track. And I've looked at a lot of them. He was many other things, too, that I had to face and had to deal with. And yet, fortunately, he was also the most loving person I've ever known. And it was beautiful to deal with my jealousy and my hate, or it was that at the time, in the light of his love that he was able to transmit. It was a beautiful experience, and it worked out. I've cleaned up a lot of stuff, both of our memories.
One of the things that you brought to him that you talked with me about...
Many opportunities.
Something in your nature that I think is very, very special and that I've experienced too. When there's a tangle, when there's a hurt, when there's a problem, when there's a wound, you confront it.
Oh, yeah.
You don't sit around on it and let it fester. You go after it. Get on the phone, write a letter, go see somebody. And this is something that you brought even to him, as I remember, because it wasn't always that easy for him, or it wasn't always his style, perhaps, to jump in that direct, blunt way.
Well, he didn't hold on to things like I did. I've been holding on to things for 10,000 years. He turned them loose.
That's true.
Turned them loose. And he could blow up and blast me right out of the room easily. As you well know, he was capable of doing. He could get mad at me quicker than he could at anybody else, even you. He even admitted that. But he'd get over it. It'd pass. He didn't hold these things in the thought pattern. And you and I have a tendency to hold on to them and keep reactivating. I've used that crazy illustration I watched with a man in New York once. I was with him in a taxi cab and had this silent argument with the taxi cab driver. Oh, he was overpaying the fare, and he was blasting the man. They had almost a fight. And we came on in, went upstairs, and we were a whole lot of people there, and it was a nice meeting, and everything was going fine. And all of a sudden, I heard all this. There was a big group standing around, and this man was reliving and saying what he had said to the taxi cab driver all over again. And he was red in the face, and he was saying a lot of things he hadn't said that he wished he had said. The craziest thing, we catch ourselves, if we watch ourselves, going and reactivating. And Dad didn't do this. He never held. He turned loose. He would blow up, but turn loose of it very quickly.
Did that with the hospital?
Oh, anything. Anything he could walk out of something. I've been trying to do that for years. You do it by quitting thinking about it. You take your mind off of it.
That's a little different from repressing, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, quite different. You just don't think about it. You don't deal with it. You don't
feed it, huh?
Feed it at all. You cannot feed these things, these negative karmic patterns, or they grow. And they get so big they really swamp you. The stuff that spills out of the unconscious you can't handle. It blasts you, and you slip. The body, what breaks, of course, is the body, the flesh. And you begin to suffer. And then you wonder, what in the world is wrong with me? And you have set the pattern for this. You've torn yourself apart. You've made yourself sick. Emotionally, mentally. And then it reproduces itself in the flesh. Later, it comes more slowly. All of psychosomatic medicine, of course, is telling us.
In addition to this release business, there are other disciplines that I've seen you use that many of us have and cherish them. One of them, a tiny little one, but that many have picked up, is those crazy little circles with a smile in it in your letters, where you're grinning at yourself and at the world and at karma and at us and at the whole scheme as you go along. And that's been a choice for you, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Keep that
I think, too, that we should mention at this point, I'm a great believer in confessional prayer. Now, I don't mean there are some things you can go out and talk to your best friend about. Some things you can sit down and share with your wife or your husband or a son or a daughter or some mother or father, somebody related. But there are other things that you need to work with that you just deal with in your mind with God. And this confessional prayer, that business of forgiving yourself and then asking God's forgiveness. Now, this is while you're looking at a face of the person that you're having the difficulty with. And you hold it. You can do this every day until it goes away. It won't take you but about a week to get rid of something you've been carrying around this life. And 14 days will clean up several thousand years. You forgive yourself of what you've done and said to this face that you're looking at. And then you ask God's forgiveness. And then you forgive the face. The person that it stands for. Touch that's the symbol. And then you bless. And you put light around. And you love that face. You do this regularly for a while. And relationships will clean up. And you know what happens? Wonderful. The other person seems to get a lot better. Actually, of course, we begin to change, too, within ourselves.
That loving can also be chosen, can't it? One of the things that I mentioned to you the other day, that a happy memory I have, is a letter you wrote me many, many years ago, in which you said, never write me without putting love at the end somewhere.
Yeah. Well, Harmon, I needed that from you.
I needed it.
You're very, very capable, and I knew you were capable, but I hadn't been getting.
I've tried since then, but we can make those choices, can't we?
Sure we do.
Very concrete ways.
They are daily choices. This is the important thing. We do not do things quickly. Don't think that you can just push something away quickly. It didn't build itself quickly if it relates to karmic patterns, to karmic numbers. And they've taken you a long time. As I've often said, it's the mess we're in we can't possibly have created in one life. And we've got to blame it on other people. Why are we here if they created it, you see? I mean, it doesn't make sense. And so we need to work diligently, persistently. That's a phrase for it, isn't it? It's line upon line. Here a little, there a little. The precept upon precept, step by step. But continue working at it. And gradually get rid of it.
One way in which I've seen you do that, and your father and mother did it too, is in persisting with people you take on. You make a promise to your Lord, I suppose, to them and to yourself, and then you hang on. My goodness, how you hang on. Years after years after years. Even when things go bad and problems arise, you hang on. Pray for them, talk to them, and won't let go. We can choose to do this, can't we? Those that we take into the bundle of our days, we can hang on to.
We have to. We have to. we got a wonderful example. God's been hanging on to us for a long time. And if we don't act like him, well, we got to be persistent. We got to stay in there and keep working at it. This whole business gets to be so exciting.
Part of the discipline that enables us to do this with our peers and our spouses and all the rest, too, that I've seen you work at, and many of us have picked it up from the readings, is taking on somebody less fortunate, somebody in trouble.
Dad has a beautiful phrase about that. He says, go out and get yourself somebody that's younger than you are, and spend energy and time. Not somebody you're responsible for, not somebody you got to do it for, not somebody you already are doing things for, but somebody that's outside of your little world, and help them, make their life richer, make their life fuller, give them assistance. It may be just encouragement. It may be just money. It may be whatever you got, talent, suggestions, prayer. There's thousands of things you can do with people, young people. Or, he says, if you don't want to work with a young person, maybe you got a problem, then go get an old person who's really beyond your ken, and make their life richer. Now, many people do this. They do it in hospitals, they do it in rest homes, they do it in all kinds of places. This is wonderful, but particular, not a general thing that people see, but these private things that you work at with individuals. And if you don't know any old people, that are past, that people call old, I will be glad to volunteer.
Many of us have heard you speak about this, and we've read it in the readings. It occurs to me to do something just gently that I hadn't planned to, and to say that I watched Hugh Lynn do this when my son was in deep trouble, and with the law, and Hugh Lynn showed up and showed up and showed up and managed to do it in such a way that my son didn't experience him as a friend of mine, but as a friend of his. Next time somebody says, pick on somebody who needs you, remember this guy is not just preaching. He does it, as many of us really want to do, but we can take the time and the effort to do it. Now we're at a break point, and I've got some surprises that even Hugh Lynn doesn't know about. And it begins by asking Gladys to come up here, wherever she is. I saw her somewhere. Here she is, right here in front of me. Come on up, Gladys. This is a very active A.R.E. and a very active Board of Trustees, and people care and love and see and hear. And Hugh Lynn, when he spoke last night about what it's meant to be on a journey with you, was speaking for all of us. And so it just happens that the membership has prepared at this 50th anniversary of A.R.E. a medallion for you that has your name on it, or at least says Gladys Davis Turner, and it looks gold like your soul. And it says 1981 50th year. And we want you to wear it and to remember how much we cherish you. And this is our gift to you.
And I have a suggestion for this audience. Every time you read an education reading, or an extract from an education reading, pray for Gladys. Because they might not be there unless she'd been there.
The next part of the mischief that the membership and the trustees have created here involves getting Sally up here, and I've got to find her somewhere and get. June's going to help bring her up here. Come on, Sally, we need you up here for something very special.
on, sit down. You sit down.
All right, this too begins with a medallion, and I hope that I don't know where Hugh Lynn will wear it. If he wears it maybe hanging on an ear, it depends on which incarnation that it celebrates. But Sally perhaps will wear it too, and it's got Hugh Lynn's name on it because we're celebrating his leadership in the organization at this time, but we're counting on both of you to use it in various ways, and it says again, 1981, 50th year, and I'm going to hand it to you, Sally, to hold on to that and make sure it gets worn and used once in a while. And one of the first places that we want you to use this kind of memory and promise that looks forward into a lot of lives is a trip, which has been arranged. We're not shipping you off into the next flight yet. That comes a little later.
Thank you.
I'll read you the schedule that's handed to me. Inside here is a packet of tickets and arrangements of all sorts. And I'm going to read you what it says. Now, I don't know whether you have any choice in this matter, because I didn't have that much to do with it, and I don't usually box you in this tightly, but I kind of think you're going to like it. It says Saturday, July 4th, which is pretty soon, 8 a.m., you depart Norfolk. You arrive in San Francisco at 12:30 p.m. and have lunch there. At 2:30, you embark on a steamboat, TSS Fair Sea, and 5 o'clock is sailing time. You then go up the coasts of the continent, and you have your choice of tours whenever you stop in Vancouver, Nanaimo, Ketchikan, Juneau, Sitka, and Victoria. You arrive. I don't very often get to see them stunned. I'm getting a chance. Arrive back in San Francisco at 9 a.m. on Saturday, July 18th, with the 1 p.m. flight out of San Francisco, back in Norfolk that evening. This is the gift of people who love you.
I've got this thing on my neck.
And I hope y'all enjoyed listening to the interview with Harmon Bro and Hugh Lynn Cayce as they talked about their perspective on life, karma, anger, and more from the Edgar Cayce perspective. I want to thank you guys so much for listening this week. On behalf of everyone here at the Association for Research and Enlightenment, and of course our broadcasting partner moretalk.tv, I'm your host Brenton Bickerstaff, reminding you to always smile along the way. Have a great week, everybody. And now it's time for the Thought for the Day. And joining me this week on the show for the Thought for the Day is Dr. Bill Austin. Bill, thank you so much for joining me again for the Thought for the Day. Always appreciate it.
My pleasure, Brent. Thank you again for having me.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And if you want to go ahead and share the Thought for the Day with our listeners.
I'd be happy to. This comes from reading 1246-2. Yet the choice of that form which any of these shall take is ever dependent upon the will, that heritage from the Father that makes for every soul's development, whether as a companion for those environs of the celestial form, or whether the terrestrial or the earth that must find its way. For the will of self is as of the Father. He hath not will that any soul should perish, but have, with each temptation, with each trial, prepared a way of escape, making as the bridge the cross, over which each soul may find the glory of its Lord, and of that to which it has sought to attain. You know, there's a lot of gems in here. You know, he's talking about it's dependent upon the will. And whose will is he talking about? Our will that I feel like we can create, our egotistical will, you know, that tries to satisfy our desires, or the will of the Father that he says is our heritage. You know, it's something that is given to us by our Creator, and that the Creator's will is not to have anyone perish, but to have an escape route. And the escape route is really a decision. It's a choice to turn back to the bounty of the Father and the security, the safety of God, versus trying to manipulate it and control it and make it happen ourselves. You know, it's for me, it's a very powerful one, saying that we're being held in the hand of God.
Yeah, I agree. It's there is a lot going on in this one. It is very, very profound. The sentence that I really clung to on this one is, "He hath not willed that any soul should perish, but hath with each temptation, with each trial, prepared a way of escape." And to me, that's grace. I define that as grace, where no matter how bad your situation can get, there is always a choice, like you said, to be made. The life just presents you with these decisions, kind of a crossroads, as they're known as,
Mhm.
where you're given this opportunity where you can take the high road or the low road. You can he worded it saying, "Each trial prepared a way of escape." And I think the escape is not so much the escape that you think of, where you're leaving it all behind and just forgetting about it all. It's actually escape into a higher level of consciousness, a higher level of awareness. And that's kind of the hallmark of the Cayce readings, is that by taking all these tools that are presented throughout the readings, you it's not that you escape all your problems, it's that you're able to reach this level of awareness by having faith in a creator, having faith in just knowing that everything will work itself out, and you escape into that knowing. It's just a state of knowing, and it's a blissful state. It's not something where you just get there and then you're there. Enlightenment is not some path where, it's truly a path. It's not something where it has, an end where, okay, I've reached enlightenment, I'm good now. It's this constant, you're constantly presented with choices, with situations where you have these different paths that you can take. And it's you can always find the answer, I think, intuitively by searching deep enough, and you reach these levels of awareness that,
Yeah.
I could go on and on about how special it is to have that tool built into the have it built into our sojourn here.
Right. And it's not an escape in the sense, as you were saying, of getting away, more in the sense of returning home.
Right. Absolutely. And it's incredibly inspiring to know that that's always available to us, and there's so many different paths to get to that place. The kingdom within, it's commonly called. It's heaven. It's truly a state of heaven that you can create here on earth. Cayce made it very clear that it's a state of consciousness, a state of understanding, where you can bring heaven down onto the earth plane. It's inspiring to know that that's always there.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Bill, thank you so much for joining me again for the thought for the day. Always inspiring to hear your words.
My pleasure, Brent. Thank you once again for having me.
Absolutely.